You've been to the NFC several occasions.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the history of the stage? I mean, I was having to look at my notes now. We had directors like Jean-Luc Godard, John Huston, Satyajit Ray, Martin Scorsese, Elia Kazan, David Lean, and Akira Kurosawa here.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd be in such company?
Sure. You know, I wasn't an idiot savant in Baltimore living in a trailer and eating dog shit, but I'm proud to be here. It means a lot to me. I'm impressed by being here and very, very flattered to be asked by here. And I continue to be startled by the fairness people treat me with. I think I've completely been understood my career. I don't feel misunderstood. I think in the beginning it is very important to fail and to not be accepted. And there's nothing worse than doing something very early in your career and being lauded. And then how do you follow that, really? And so in the beginning of my career, we only used bad reviews. We based the campaigns on negative reviews. But that could never happen today, really, because then there was a cultural war in the 60s. It was us versus them. And most of the film critics were the leftover ones that were appalled by underground movies. And today, all film critics are hip. There's nobody that's going to rise to bait, basically. And so I think David Lynch tried to use some negative reviews in his last one, which I really respected when he did that. But it doesn't work as much anymore because nobody's going to give you reviews like, we had one that said like a septic tank explosion. It must be seen to be believed. You know? And the very best review I ever got was the Canadian government. It just said destroyed when I sent it there, you know, and it didn't come back. So when they burn it, it really means that it worked. But, and in London, they were always pretty good. It's still in Pink Flamingos, the end is illegal here. It's never been approved here. It's really the only country in the world. It shows on American television now, uncut, which I find appalling. Because they called, the Directors Guild called and said they want to blur the blowjob scene. I said, that's okay, they can do that. And they forgot to.
Now, you've often said you're not a very technical person, you're not a mechanical person. Now, why did you choose filmmaking? Because
it is hard. You know, you look at my early movies, you can tell I didn't know what I was doing, but if you like it, you can say it was raw. That means bad, really. And I think that in a way it worked accidentally because those films almost looked like they were documentaries. It looked like we really did live in there. People thought we lived in the trailer and stuff. And so I liked it for that. I learned by doing it, and I think that's the best way to learn, really, by your own mistakes. And sometimes mistakes are the best things. They turned out to be the best work, especially in the art world. So I think mistakes are not necessarily something you want to erase.
When did you first realize that film could be art? When did that first go into your head?
Art, when I saw William Castle put buzzers under the seat, or when I didn't know what a director was when I was young. In the 50s, nobody talked about directors, really. But I saw in Life magazine William Castle always appearing as opening, climbing out of a coffin and doing these ridiculous things. And later, Alfred Hitchcock certainly did that in America. He had a TV show, and he would, his stomach became his signature, the same way my mustache became mine. You need a look. You got to have a look. And so early, I tried to look kind of like a hippie pimp, and I guess I still do.
Well, conversely, when did you first realize that film could be trash?
Well, when I saw basically Ingmar Bergman, you know, because in Baltimore, the first time we saw his movies, they were released as sex films in Baltimore. It was Monica's Hot Summer, and I really loved Bergman the best, and I was really sad when he died. And although I love that last documentary about him on his island, just living alone, where he sat in that screening room and he didn't even turn around. He just raised his hand, and the projectionist would start a film. And he was the puke king. He did puke first. If you look at Bergman's early films, puke was really radical to have. So they called me the puke king and all, but he was the puke king, really. Bergman introduced puke into the cinema. And if you look at his early movies, they always are puking in it, you know. And I love Nye Zetterling really a lot, too, who was another puker, really. And puke in the cinema has its roots in Sweden.
your first film was going to be Dorothy the Kansas Pothead. What do you remember about that? Was there a script? How did you...
I didn't know how to make it. It was Dorothy the Kansas City Pothead, and it was on 8mm, and I thought I was just going to have the actors on a tape recorder say the thing and try to lip sync it, which really doesn't work. And I started to do it, and then I realized I could never make it, but I had sent a press release out, so somebody already wrote about it, and I just pretended there was this movie. There was no such movie ever, really.
What would it have been? What was the idea for it?
The idea of it was just that it was, in those days I was on LSD a lot. I took LSD really early. We stole it from a hospital in Baltimore that was using it to treat alcoholics in 1963. It was Sandoz acid. It really worked. And I loved LSD. My mother always says, don't tell young people that. But I never had a bad trip. And people used to say, when we went out on acid, I thought, go out. I was the chair. And Divine used to be on acid, like singing Dionne Warwick albums with shower curtain rings and a day-old beard and a bathrobe, and we would be tripping, and it was fun. We used to see Bergman movies tripping. I used to make Divine go, no, I want to see Elizabeth Taylor movies. Can't we see rich people movies? And the worst was The Hour of the Wolf, when she rips her face off, and you watch that on acid. It's really...
Well, as opposed to rich people's movies, you also saw a lot of poor people's movies. You saw a lot of films in the 70s in New York, late 60s, the sort of grindhouse era. What do you remember of the kind of grindhouse films that you were seeing at the time?
Well, we went in Baltimore, tested exploitation movies. I mean, really, they all showed there. And there was 3 drive-ins, and mostly blaxploitation movies were really, really big there. So we went to see them all, but I would be the only white person in the theater watching Mandingo, where they boil a white racist in a pot while the audience was cheering, and I would lurk out of the theater. So I grew up on those movies, but at the same time, the art house movies. And I love Marguerite Duras films. I recently showed The Truck in New York at the French Film Institute, and it was packed. I loved it. So I saw those movies, and at the same time, Walt Disney movies. And because he had the best villains as a kid, I wanted to be those villains. I wanted to live the life of a Disney villain. And underground movies, too, at the same time.
Well, my next question, there's a season going on here of Warhol films. How did you first encounter the films of Andy Warhol, and what did they say to you? How did they inspire you?
I think this beautiful first volume of the catalog resume of the films of Warhol is a really beautiful book. I see you have it here. And the early Warhol films, I predict, will one day be treated with as much respect as Warhol's late paintings that were, when he was alive, treated badly. He invented video art, really. I mean, these films, those screen tests are so brilliant. And he reinvented movies. I mean, it was so radical. And didn't he influence La Ventura? I mean, basically all the slowness, the opposite of what kids like today. MTV ended it, and Andy started it. And I think those films are really, really good. He made hardcore porno, really. I mean, Couch, if you see the really uncut Couch. And I did this thing at the Warhol. Did I talk about the Warhol thing in this? Because I want to tell it again. About Andy's porn?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Well, it was great to look through his real movies that he made that were really hardcore pornography, which then was unheard of. And Blue Movie he got arrested for that and found guilty for that. And for years, Viva wouldn't let that movie be showed. But I think she's finally said it could be now. But if you look at, it was a joke then because in porno, the way it got legal, it had to be socially redeeming, so it was people fucking talking about Vietnam. You always had to be talking about something that was socially redeeming, so it was so ridiculous, really.
Well, how did his films inspire your early films, your more experimental earlier stuff?
I think the Kuchar brothers did more, really, but because you could make your friends stars, really. That's what was so amazing. And I didn't meet Andy until really after Pink Flamingos, because New York was the last place my films cut on. They played in L.A., San Francisco, but not New York. And after Pink Flamingos came out, I mean, I had seen all the Warhol films, and I had met some of the Warhol people, but not Andy, because he had been shot, so he didn't go to Max's Kansas City anymore. And the last thing he wanted to meet was a new group of lunatics, basically. But Fran Lebowitz and Glenn O'Brien, who was the editor of Interview, took us to meet Andy, and we had a screening of the movie. And he hid in the closet for the whole movie until it was over, and then took me in the back and said, "You should make the exact movie again, exactly like that," which I still don't know what he meant. It was a very Orwellian statement. And then he said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Female Trouble." And he said, "Well, I'll pay for it." And I was stupefied. And I said no, really, because I guess I realized it would be Andy Warhol's Female Trouble, and I didn't want. But it was incredibly generous. And he took Fellini to see Pink Flamingos, and that was in the paper, which nothing could have been better to me than that. And later he put Divine on the cover of Interview, and he was very, very encouraging to us. He always just used to say to me, "Do you make money from those movies? How do you make money?" He always wanted to know how you made money with the movie.
In the early days of your filmmaking, was it about a social experiment? Was it about the film? I mean, it seems to be a lot of the earlier films are about the projection itself.
Yeah, nobody sent me a headshot. Really. There were no agents. Except the guy with the asshole did come over and said, "I have something you might be interested in." But I didn't make him do it then. I took his word because I knew Bob Adams, who owned the farm where we filmed it, had seen him do this, right? Which was a yoga exercise, basically. He told me. I didn't ask any questions. I just knew a star was born.
But a lot of those early films were shown in churches, and they were more...
Not Pink Flamingos. The early ones were in churches, Mondo Trasher, because we knew that the censor board wouldn't bust a church. And people forget, in the 60s, churches let the Black Panthers meet there. I mean, in Baltimore, we had the Catonsville Nine that were like anti-war radicals and priests that got arrested and burned draft cards and stuff. So the churches then were underground cinemas, which is kind of hard to imagine that happening today. But then it was very much like that in New York, too.
When did you first meet Divine?
I met Divine in high school. His parents grew up, moved, and they had a little nursery for children, which Divine was not a great ad since he was the only child. And he was a nerd. He didn't go out till he was 16, really, and he was forced to do his mother's hair every night. That was really hairdo abuse. I mean, imagine if you couldn't go out and every night had to give your mother a hairdo. And so then he became a hairdresser and then would steal the women's coats, fur coats. They'd come in and say, "Where is my coat?" He'd say, "I don't know, really." And then they would flip out and everything. He hated being a hairdresser. He was the angriest hairdresser that ever teased a head.
Is it true that you lived in a house that belonged to was rented by F. Scott Fitzgerald and that Zelda?
He grew up in the house where she went crazy and set it on fire, yes. That's before he moved to my parents' neighborhoods with his family. Then his mother later wrote a book, My Son Divine, and she goes to gay bars now and say, "Hi, I'm Divine's mother."
Well, how much of Divine was a creation that you worked on together with Glenn? How did that work out?
Well, I think Divine was very angry. Glenn Milstead, really, he was angry because he got beat up every day in school and everything. And I used that anger and designed this character for him that basically, at first he brought him power. He felt good about being this character. But then later he realized that he got the best reviews once this character was established to play the opposite, in Polyester playing a housewife or in Hairspray playing a mom. And he got very, very tired of the eating shit thing. I mean, basically, he could never escape it. People thought he was insane. They thought he did it for real. And he was tired of talking about it. And when we were trying to make the sequel to Pink Flamingos, I don't think ever really wanted to make that movie. So it's a shame that Divine, of course, that he died. I'm mad about it and shocked by it. And he could have been, the day before he died, the next day he was going to be all married with children for the first time, playing a gay uncle as a male on a big hit sitcom in America that really had no gay characters there. It could have been a big success. Really.
How did the Dreamland ensemble cast come together? People like David Lochary, Mink Stoll, those sorts of people.
We all took LSD together. Really, that was it. You know, I grew up in like a suburban sort of upper middle class neighborhood, and I band together with all that we took LSD, and then we wanted to be beatniks, and so that meant the gay crowd, and then we all hung around with mixed. It was straight and gay people. And then we went downtown and met beatniks and hung out together. And I still like that. I hate separatism. I like gay, straight, mixed, everybody together so you don't know who's what. It's much more fun that way, you know? Then I like to hear straight people's bad nights, too, you know? I don't want to just hear gay bad nights. I want to hear all bad nights.
Well, what was Baltimore like in those days? And why did you choose to stay there, basically, make it your filmmaking capital?
Then it hid. It was embarrassed. It had a inferiority complex. And I try to praise everything that cities try to hide. And I always joke that Baltimore should, put a bumper sticker saying, "Come to Baltimore and be shocked." And they did eventually. They put that bumper sticker out. And but they always enjoy, even the Mayor Schaefer, who was there, used to say, "I don't care what these movies are, keep making them here," even the most hideous ones. They were always supportive, really. Nobody was ever against me making those movies there. But at the same time, it really did lead to, and Barry Levinson also, who made movies there. And now The Wire, which I think is a brilliant television show, if you haven't seen it, and Homicide in the Corner that was shot there and still being shot there. There is a big film community there. The people that, Vincent Perennia, who did the set designs for all my movies, and Pat Moran, who cast them, they work. I mean, Pat won the Emmy for The Corner, Homicide. So it very much led to a much bigger film community there. But nobody makes movies in Baltimore about Harbor Place or the nice parts of Baltimore. They make it about the extremes. And it's still a very extreme city. I was in a bar recently, and I said to him, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "Can I be frank?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I trade deer meat for crack." You can't make that up.
You've often said with Pink Flamingos that you were trying to shock the world, which is what the Manson family was setting out to do. Did you think obviously without the murder aspect of it all, do you think you succeeded, or what were you trying to do in that respect?
It's very different with the Manson family. I have to kind of be serious if I talk about that, because I had just been to the Manson trial right before I made Pink Flamingos, so it was a huge influence on me. But today, I taught in prison for a long time because of that. I'm friends with Leslie Van Houten, one of the women that was convicted in that, who I think, and I fight for her release. You're much more, in Europe, much more forgiving to many of the Red Brigade and all them were let out. It was a different time. It was an insane time. This was a 17-year-old girl that met the most notorious madmen of our time. And she's been in jail 37 years. That is something, right? So I believe in rehabilitation. I taught in prison. So if you believe in rehabilitation, I think some people should get out, and I think she's one. And I think that you are much more forgiving in Europe about cults and about people that were in insane political times and radical groups and everything. You seem to be more forgiving here.
Well, speaking of cults, you've become something of a cult item yourself. When did you first notice that happening, and did it bother you?
Well, a cult, not a real cult. I can't, no one commits suicide because I tell them to, I think the most alarming, I saw a girl recently that had, is this in the movie? I hope it isn't, but she had Female Trouble script tattooed on her legs. I thought, well, that's a new look for fall, a script. I guess people used to send me things like a letter that said it was a nude guy, in his underpants sitting on a cot surrounded by handguns, and it said, "How do I get you to notice me?" And at first it scared me, and then I realized it was funny. He meant it to be funny. I don't get the fan mail in my house anymore. Once I found someone living in my yard, and I said, you can't stay here. He said, "Why?" This was People's Park or something, Scared the shit out of me. I called the police, right? He was shocked I would call the police. And he was reading the I Ching. Who would come to my house to read the I Ching? Seems like not a real spiritual retreat.
Well, do you think you encourage a kind of familiarity from your films? Do you think that's something that people respond to in you?
People will say anything to me. On an airplane, a woman will turn to me and say, "My entire family fucked me under the Christmas tree." And she's right. I do understand. And I try to be nice and said, was grandmother first or last? I try to get her to... I believe in the talking cure.
Well, moving on to the talking cure, you've been doing your stand-up, your talk for quite a long time. After Desperate Living, you were at quite a low time in your life. Did you ever think that you might give up filmmaking, or that filmmaking might give you up?
Yeah, so I became a journalist for a while, and I wrote Crackpot, and I wrote Shock Value. Basically, anybody in show business thinks it's going to vanish. Everybody in show business has very low self-esteem, or why would we enter a business that for the rest of our life depends on strangers telling us if we're good or not? So I think everyone in show business thinks fame is going to make up for what they didn't get. It doesn't. It just makes problems weirder and funnier. But I don't know. I think that, what was the question? When did it, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, did you ever think that you might give it, filmmaking would give you up? Or you
Yeah, I did. I always think it could vanish tomorrow. You know, it's hard getting my next movie made. So I always have backup plans. I think it's always good to have other interests. So I can write a book, or I can do this. I can be in a movie, or I always think everybody thinks it's going to vanish the next day, because as far as the banks are concerned, I don't have a real job. I got to think up something weird. My job is to think up fucked up things. How do you put that on your tax reports, you know?
Well, in a film like the one we've seen tonight, do you ever worry about giving away your good ideas for movie scripts?
Well, I test ideas. I mean, basically, some of these ideas probably are in my next movie. When I do this act, I always put in new jokes and stuff, and I see what will work, and then I sometimes put that in a movie. It's a way to test material.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talk about being a journalist. Have you ever thought about doing anything non-fiction, making a documentary, or doing something?
Well, I've written about things. I just signed a book contract for a book called Role Models, where I'm going to write about people that interest me and tell my life through them, and how, and some are strippers, some are, and some are, one's Tennessee Williams. So, yeah, I am still a journalist. I'm a writer. I mean, my artwork, I write it, I think it up, and then I do it. My movies, I write. The only thing I don't write is when I'm in somebody else's movies. So basically, I do have to think up stuff every day. And I remember in the 50s, in America, they used to have these bumper stickers that said "Thimp," T-H-I-M-K, and I think of that every day now. I have to thimp something.
Well, would you ever consider making a documentary?
Probably not. If you come to Baltimore, you see my films are documentary.
And also, is it true that you're actually in every documentary that's ever been made?
Yes, I am a documentary whore. Have you ever seen one that I'm not in? I think I'm in every one of them. And they come on TV, and I said, I did that? I didn't remember I did that. They sent me one recently, and I said, I was in that? I forget.
We'll come back to the recent version of Hairspray. For a lot of people, Hairspray was a kind of watershed for you. Is it?
Was it a what?
A watershed, a marked a change in your career.
Yeah, I accidentally made a family movie, and I never planned that when I was writing Hairspray. I never thought, this is going to be commercial, this is going to be... Hairspray was really the story of me. I was Tracy. I mean, I grew up in Baltimore in really a very racist town, and the amusement parks were racially tense. I mean, I remember when I was young, we could go to the amusement park, and blacks couldn't come unless they were the maid, and then they could go on the rides with you because the parents got sick. I mean, I remember this stuff. And so I was joined in that, and I went to the marches and everything, and I probably went the other way. I only hang around with black people for a while. I had a girlfriend. It was that long ago. And I got beat up for having a black girlfriend, and her mother owned a record shop. So that was really true, that we would go down to the black neighborhood and have great times. And, my mother even said once, I don't mind you have to bring black people home. Do they have to be gay too?
Hairspray was your last collaboration with Divine. Yeah. How do you think that would have panned out had Divine... Did you have any projects lined up? Was that just a full stop on
Hairspray had just opened, really a week after, so it was a terrible feeling. We had been on a tour all over the country, and Divine, thank God, read all his reviews, and he died. So the news teams had every shot of us very happy at premieres, and then they would cut to the funeral with me as a pallbearer. So it really... I don't remember it. It's a blank in my memory, kind of. How would it have turned out? Who knows? Divine would be a year older than me, be 62. In A Dirty Shame, he would have played the grandmother. I know that much. How would he have felt about the success of all this? It's always hard. I know when the musical came on Broadway, it was hard at first for the people that were in my movie. They owned that part, and now somebody else was doing it. And they understood that when the new movie came out, and they saw it, the people that were in the musical. But they get used to it. But at first, it's hard. When I watched the new movie, my life flashed before my eyes. I just thought of all the people that weren't with us anymore. The hairdresser, Van Smith, who died recently, did the clothes. So it was very personal to me to watch. But I felt really respected in this movie. They tried to keep my spirit in it, and they did, I think. I mean, there's little jokes about pregnant women drinking and smoking, you know, and there was, and I think they had to reinvent it. If they didn't, it wouldn't have worked. That's why the musical worked, because they reinvented my movie, and I think this movie reinvented the play and my movie. And I know there's some people that have almost misguided allegiance to me that don't want to like the movie, but it's not a contest, and I think Adam Shankman did a very good job with it, and I'm proud of it, and I'm glad I got to be the Flasher, the only dirty thing in it, right?
Did the loss of Divine affect your writing at any kind? Because you'd already made one film without him. Did you find it affected the way you wrote or the scripts you were writing?
Well, I thought I certainly have never had a man play a woman in my films, and I probably never will. I got Johnny Depp, which it was completely different than if I was a male star. I had really never made a movie that was around a male. And I guess that was the only thing I could do, really. And Johnny, I got very, very lucky because luckily he chose to take a chance with me. And he's gone on, God, he has one of the best careers of all, you know, and he's still very much a gentleman. He came back and did the whole, when we did the Crybaby director's cut, he didn't have to come back and do that long interview and do the whole thing. He's been a very good friend.
Could you talk us through the writing process? Is there a ritual every time you start a new movie? How do you approach it?
Well, first of all, I have to think, what genre is it, you know? Then I do the location scout before I write. I have to know where they're going to live. And you might see me sitting out front of a house, and I'm thinking of horrible things in your living room. Then I'm going to come back 2 years later and ask you if I can do it. And then I write each character, and I got to know their names. And then I have pages of it. It's easy for me to think up characters. And then the hardest part is the plot, the narrative, which is the only thing that really makes a movie a hit. And the cliche that is true is the first 10 pages of the script get your movie made, and the last 10 pages make it a hit. And that's really hard to me. Still, the narrative is really, really hard. And but you do it, and I just think I call it like a power draft. Just keep writing that. Don't reread it. Just keep going. And suddenly you have 100 pages thing, and you look at it, and it might be terrible, but then you rewrite, and then it becomes real. And, you know, the whole thing about file cards are good, different colors, and all that stuff. Everything in those books is kind of true. But the main thing is, I know I write with music. I know the soundtrack when I turn in the first draft. So I use music. I got to know where they live, and I start to hang out in the bars in that community, and to make friends, to see what the people are like and what they do. And I try to always go to a community that hasn't had a film made in it yet, that doesn't know how horrible it is to let filmmakers into your house.
Well, how has the pitching process changed? From the early days, you just simply went ahead, you borrowed money from your father, I believe.
Yeah, it was the opposite. If my father knew what it was about, he wouldn't have given me the money.
And how has the pitching process changed over the years?
It hasn't changed. The big change is there used to be 20 people to go pitch a movie to, now there's 4, because all the companies have bought each other. So they're all owned by one big company. My new film, which is a children's movie called Fruitcake, I pitched it to one person, and they said yes, and I wrote the script, and then they didn't make it. So, but that always happens. That happens, turnaround happens a lot. Pitching is exactly like what it's in the player. That's not an exaggeration. You go to Hollywood, and an 8-foot woman comes out and says, "Would you like Vichy water?" And then they all have Sam Francis prints in the office. And then you go in, and you know, they have to hear it, and they only get to approve 3 movies a year. The worst thing ever, I've heard the worst pitch ever, somebody said, and then something funny happens when you don't say that.
Pekka was the first film in which you kind of openly celebrated your obsession with modern art. You have a sideline in this. Is this a serious profession that you...
To me it is. I mean, I've had a museum show, and it's something I never talk about with my movie audience. I very much kept it separate. I've had a lot of shows. I started doing it in 1992. I had a museum show, the new museum that traveled to Winterthur in Switzerland, and the Warhol Museum, and there's 3 books of it. And yeah, it's something I like very much. I collect contemporary art. I love the power of contemporary art. When I was 7 years old, I went to the Baltimore Museum and bought this little Moreau print and brought it home, and all my 7-year-old friends said, "Oh, that's ugly, I hate it." And I thought, see, this is great, you know, because contemporary art does hate the middle class. Really. They hate you, yeah. And I like it's a secret language that you have to be able to see, and I like that. And once you can see it, I never understood when people say, it's the emperor's new clothes. Well, isn't that the point? If you think he's nude and that is art, isn't it? And art is magic. It changes something from nothing into something, so you look at something differently from then on because of art. So, and I never understood when people say, my kid could do that. Well, stupid, get him to do it. It just sold for $1 million.
Do you ever worry that people might forget who you are, what your core values are as a filmmaker, because you do these, you have the artworks, you have your television shows?
No, because I use the same thing in all. It's a different world. It's a different thing. But basically, I'm always asking you to laugh at things that aren't funny in real life, and I believe that humor is incredibly political, and I can get along with Republicans. I'm tired of people bashing Bush. I feel, well, go burn down a school then. That's what we did. I'm tired of liberals always saying, well, go turn over a car when you leave here. So basically, if you can make them laugh, they'll listen, I think.
Well, have you ever thought about branching out into other areas? I mean, Britney Spears has a fragrance, so does J.Lo. Maybe you could have...
Well, I always said, yeah, toilet waters, yes, yeah. And, yeah. I could do that. I want to do a magazine, too, called Drip, which is about the bad side of celebrity. And the worst time ever to be recognized is in a doctor's office when you're waiting, and then somebody says, who are you? Are you John Wayne? And then they say, what's the matter with you?
I'm going to open the questioning out to the audience now, so if anybody has any questions, could you put your hand up? Lady at the back over here.
What's the worst tourist attraction you've ever been to?
I don't usually go to tourist attractions that much. I like bad tourist attractions. I don't know. I went to the top of the Empire State Building, which is fun, but you can't jump or push anybody or anything. They have all those things around. And now all high buildings are a little scary. So I don't know. I don't usually go to tourist attractions, to be honest. So the worst one ever. I don't know that one because I never go.
Any other questions?
What film could I not live without? Of my own? I never watch my own movies. I don't know. If I had to pick, like a desert island movie, that kind of thing, I would pick the longest one, probably Berlin Alexander plot. So, something that was really long if I only had one movie.
Well, in Sesame Demented, all your cinematic terrorists have the autographs of famous directors tattooed on their arms. Who would you have?
Joseph Losey, I think, because he made Boom, my favorite failed art film ever, and it's such a good movie. If you haven't seen it, where Elizabeth Taylor plays Sissy Goforth, the richest woman in the world, and it's Tennessee Williams, The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. It is a staggering movie, really. And every time something happens for no reason, Richard Burton looks to the sea and goes, boom, the sound of knowing the next moment you're alive. I thought that just today.
Somebody over here?
Hi. How did your character on The Simpsons come about?
They just called me and asked me to be in The Simpsons, and I thought it was a great honor, and to be honest, that episode won the Emmy in America, and it's children come over to me with a Simpsons book and don't know anything else about me except that I was in The Simpsons. I'd always wanted to be a cartoon character, and it was great. You do it, you go to the studio, and it's kind of... there's microphones, or you do one table reading where you read the whole thing with the cast, and then you go to each microphone, kind of like a radio show, and you do a couple pages at a time, and you're directed, and then once it's all, the sound is done, of course they do the animation at the end to fit your mouth. It was a great time. I loved doing it. I like the movie, too.
Question over here.
Hi, I've had a date with John Waters, but John Waters has never had a date with me. He's just wondering if you'd like a drink after.
What did he say that?
Could you repeat that, please? I think I know what he said, but
I'm not sure he did, but... Oh, do we want to go to a drink afterwards? I would, but I have a 7 a.m. flight, I do have an album called A Date with John Waters, which is the music I hope I would play for you if I was trying to seduce you. My dream date would be to rob a 7-Eleven together and get away with it.
Well,
I'm a sucker for a parole card. Oh, you do? All right.
Well, you've compiled 2 albums now. You've had the Christmas album and the Valentine's Day album. Any plans for any more?
No, I'm trying to do Breaking Up with John Waters. That's the next one with me crying on the front. Because really, all good songs about love are bad. There's no songs about functional relationships. I can't think of one, really. So it's much better to have the misery of love, really. So I want to have an album with me sobbing. Yeah.
Question here.
What are your memories of Susan Terrell?
Susan Terrell is something, believe me. She was, of course, if you've ever seen her in, what is the movie she won, the Fat City. Well, she's amazing. But she is a little like that in real life. This is what Susan Terrell, you would introduce her and say, this is Susan Terrell, and she'd say, hi, I have the pussy of a 13-year-old. What do you say to that, really? What?
Did she ever tell you the story about how she got molested by John Huston in his oxygen tent?
No, but you know, Susu, which is called, I love when her dog died, she stuffed it and then did a one-man show with her. And you know, it's trouble, she had a terrible disease and she had her legs amputated, you know. She has robot legs now. And she told my friend when he went to visit her, said, hey, what a fucking amputee when he came in. You thought, oh my God, you know. And I bet she's gotten people that do. She is something. She was the only one. Her friend stole the script supervisor's pocketbook. That's something I remember. She was something.
There's a question here.
Yeah, I just had a question about, is there anything that you find gloriously trashy about England, specifically London?
Well, you have such
Apart from blushing, of course.
Well, no, you have such a history of course, serial killers and stuff. You know, I mean, your true crime history rivals ours. You know, Myra Hindley is your Charles Manson, and I always said that she got more time because she didn't get her roots done. It's true. Those roots kept her in jail till the end.
Have there been any crimes that have fascinated you lately in the same way that kind of?
You know, I'm not for that. I'm always like staggered by some of the ones. I'm obsessed by Blanket, Michael Jackson's son, because I think of him every day. Blanket, dinner's ready. And Blanket, have you seen his outfits? He wears like women's wigs and puts like Halloween masks he has to go out in, like a Diane Arbus picture. I think of Blanket daily. Where is Blanket now? Wish he was with us. On my lap. Where he'd be safe.
Do you feel protective about the role of Edna in the stage show? And have you
I
heard
feel what?
protective of the role because it was played by Divine? And have you heard of Michael Ball, and do you think he'll make
I think it's going to be
Edna?
good. Yeah. I think I'm going to come back, I hope, for when it comes here. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in reverse, because everywhere else in the world, the movie came out, then the musical, and then the movie. But now the movie's already out here, and then the musical's going to happen. I'm protective of it. You know, people say, why does it always have to be played by a man? And I said, well, the same way a woman plays Peter Pan. Who knows why? It became a tradition because it gives it a little edge and because it's a very un-drag queen-like role. It's a frumpy mother, which usually most drag queens don't want to look like. No, I'm not protective in it. I think, I've always said I don't think it should be a woman. And who knows, maybe one day it can be a woman, because I know women that are female impersonators. A lot of them, really. So I'm not overly protective. I think I wrote it. I'm really proud that 3 people have had success with it. I'm really proud that 3 fat girls have become stars from it. And I love when the high school musicals start that it is going to be, you know, the fat girl and the drag queen in every high school will finally get the main parts. And what's even better, and this is a true story, right when it came out, my mother called me and said, they want you to go to this school. And she told me about it. I said, don't tell me about this, because they don't have the rights to do it, and I don't want to be heartless and stop it. But it was an all-retarded version of it in a school, and I would so love to see that. You know, and not to laugh at it or anything, I think it would be really beautiful. So I think fat isn't enough anymore. Maybe we should just have all retarded versions of it everywhere. It would be really beautiful. That's the true outsider. fat is accepted now.
Chap in the red stripy shirt here.
Hi. If you could be friends with any of the characters in your movies, who would you choose to be friends with? Not just Divine.
Yeah. You know, my mother once said after she suffered through female trouble about Gator, she said, "Is that the kind of man you find attractive?" And I lied and said no.
How many of your films has your mother actually seen now?
She's seen them. She saw Mondo Trasher. That's the one when she laughed and said, "You're going to die in a mental institution, commit suicide or OD." I said, "Did you like it?" Yeah. But she's much better now. She's seen Female Trouble, Not Desperate Living, and Polyester On, all of them. My father, too, I think.
Question here.
It was great. You know, Herschel was in my house recently. You know, I'm still in touch with Herschel. He's really great. And he was at the Baltimore Film Festival, the Maryland Film Festival, and he lectured at the drive-in, which I think is great. They remade Blood Feast, too. I mean, I was in Blood Feast, too, where I play a pedophile priest. It was fun. I got to Herschel, to the set. They took me there. It was way outside of New Orleans, like an hour over that bridge. And finally we got there. It was in the middle of the night. Their night shoots. And this girl was lying there covered in fake guts. And Herschel was saying, "No, I'm not doing a second take," which was so like him. You know, he gets really mad if you have to do more than one take. So he hasn't changed. He's great. He's a really lovely man.
Question over here.
If you were to dress up in drag, would you be flowy or would you be office?
I don't know who either of them are. Who?
I presume. Could you?
And how high would your heels be?
Well, I've only been in drag once in my life, and that was as Wicked Witch of the West, as Margaret Hamilton, and when I was 8 years old to a children's birthday party. I don't have an urge to be in drag. I'm not against it. I don't know, really. I guess I would be Deborah Carr. Or Capucine, maybe. After the fence.
There's a question over here.
What's happened to your moustache?
What do you mean?
Still there.
It's still there. How do you remember it differently?
Much more noticeable and blacker.
No, I don't know. It's a little gray. That could be it. But I think it's pretty much just the way it always is.
Girl in white t-shirt over here.
Hi, we want to know if you think Phil Spector did it.
You mean the hairdo abuse or the murder? The first day, I actually thought he really wants an insanity defense. This is how he's going to start that. Like, what should I wear to court? Just tease your hair straight up in the air. It's curious because he has a new look. Have you seen his surfer dude look? I think if you're on trial for murder, you shouldn't dazzle the jury with fashion decisions. So I don't want to taint the jury by giving my opinion, actually. That English book is quite good, though. Bringing Down, whatever it's called. I just finished it, and it's woo.
There's a chap at the back here.
Hi, John. I recently survived the real Hollywood celluloid atrocity, the Transformers movie, by imagining Edith doing the voice of Optimus Prime. Can you think of any other Hollywood films that would have been improved by the addition of one or two of the Dreamlanders?
See, I didn't see that movie. You know, I'm not a big fan of special effects. I like bad ones, but new ones are like, I didn't like science fairs either, really, or science projects. Gee, what would be, you know, I did see Lindsay Lohan's, I saw Georgia Rules, and I also saw her new movie called I Know You Killed Me or something, which is staggering. She has a scene in it where she's lost her mind, because there's a scene where she comes home real slutty and like cruises the janitor. It's just like a Russ Meyer movie. She starts going, like, I think, what is she? She needs to go to rehab for that. You know, Everyone goes to rehab now. It's just, and then what was the guy that said homophobic things? What's homophobic rehab? What do they play Liza Minnelli movies? I don't know. What do they do to you when you go to homophobic rehab? I've never heard, only in LA could they ever have that, really.
What do you think of the current crop of Hollywood wild children?
I don't care about them. They're not so interesting to me, to be honest. I mean, if you're famous for nothing, you have to have a sense of humor about it, at least, or it's not so interesting to me. I mean, to me, Paris Hilton is no Edie Sedgwick, but she's done more. Edie really did nothing. Yeah. Which you have to respect, except get high and set fires, really.
Any more questions? Oh, yes, one here.
Your films. I love your films. But what do you think of Pedro Almodovar's films?
Oh, I think he treats women better than any director in the whole world. I think he treats sex beautifully. He makes it joyous. I think Pedro is probably the best film director in the world right now. I'm a huge fan.
There's a question over here.
Well, you know, this John Waters Day, they had it once. It's not where every year they have it. It was once the mayor, gave me this proclamation at the premiere of one of my movies. It was sort of like when the Wizard of Oz gives the Scarecrow a brain, that ceremony at the end. It's not like every day I give, free hairdos to the poor. That's what I would do if it was real. Let everyone out of jail. For one day.
We've got time for a couple more, if there's a question over here.
One of the wonderful things about your films is the casting of people like Tracy Lords or Patricia Hearst and, all these kind of, it's almost like rehabilitation for them.
Well, I do rehabilitation in a way, because if you have an image that you want to change, come make fun of it with me. Johnny Depp did that with being Teen Idol. Tracy Lords did it with porn. Patty Hearst did it. She played a kidnapped victim's mother. She even said to me in Pecker, did my mother say that? I said, no, I wouldn't do that to you. But so in a way, I did it by calling my films trash epics in the beginning. One critic said, you beat me to the typewriter. And if you can do that, if you make fun of what people can use against you, they can't use it against you anymore.
So do you have any people kind of like in the current celebrity
I'm a
world?
big fan of Kevin Federline. I actually want to marry him. And he is a good father. I want him to get the kids. And I basically said this in America, and it got printed a lot of places, and they called me and told me he really thought it was funny and thanked me. So he has a sense of humor. I'm not so sure she does, really. And, I don't know. You should wear underpants, I think, really. Joe, you can buy a figurine online of her flashing, and also Michael Jackson in blanket. Or you can buy them in plaster. You go online. I have them both in my own. I give them as wedding presents a lot.
A friend of mine did a film recently where somebody had to expose themselves, and he did a kind of like a Merkin type thing, only based on Britney's photo.
Well, she was plucked from what I saw. I mean, I'm not against, and worse is, what are those called, a landing strip? Oh, I'm old-fashioned. I don't know. A landing strip to me, I'd have to go home if someone take their clothes off and have a landing strip. I'm conservative in some ways. Right?
Is there likely to be a part for K-Fed in your new film?
Who knows? I like him, I wanted at the Spirit Awards him to come out with me like a couple, but they wouldn't go for it. I thought it would have been funny. And he might have done it. I don't know.
Question here.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed your commentary, DVD commentary.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was the only one. I got the job because I said, I don't think it's a campy movie. I think it's really good. And it is. If they cut 3 scenes out of that movie, she would have won the Oscar. If they cut out no wire hangers and it's not you, I hate us the dirt, those ridiculous lines, it is a good movie, I think. And I think she's really good in it. She won't talk about it. She's in... I know Faye. I've met her before, yeah. And I like her. She's funny. Sort of. I mean, I like her. But I never talked to her about that movie. I don't think you bring it up with her. It's like, I think it's off limits.
One over here.
I was just wondering what the chances are of getting your early films on DVD.
You won't really, mostly for music rights issues. I mean, Multiple Maniacs I'm trying to get back, but there's songs in there that were never paid for. Mondo Trasho never. It would cost $1 million to get the music rights to a movie that cost $2,000. It really doesn't make physical sense. It's only because of music issue rights mostly. And the early movies, I did show in my museum show. I showed them in like a video room, but they're really not very good, you know, so it's much better to just read about them and stuff. Thank you.
Oh, one over here.
Hi, we saw your movie, the documentary you made about Salton Sea, saving Salton Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any updates?
No, I don't know.
How
I just was the narrator of the movie. I didn't make that movie.
No,
I liked it. It kind of reminded me of Provincetown, where I live in the summer, meets Baltimore, like a beach resort if suddenly the water left. You know, it does make it a weird, and I like desert towns. I like desert rats. I like Needles, California, where every day it's the hottest in the country. I'm just like, where do you live? Needles. I mean, what a name for a town. And I was there once, and it was like 110 degrees at night. It was like, yikes. But dry heat, like living inside a hairdryer.
I think that's about all we've got time for. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much
I'd
for
like
coming.
to thank John Waters.